Going on, everyone, from LowKick MMA? My name is Dane Podolsky. I'm joined with Kyle the Monster Nelson. He is set to return at UFC 289 when he takes on Blake Bilder. Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time. Of
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
course, man. And just first off, how are you doing? How's training been going, and how'd the fight come together?
Training's been going great. This fight, we got a lot of notice for this one. So for 145, that's great for me. To get down to 145, it's a lot easier with a bit more notice. Some of my previous UFC fights were kind of on shorter notice, so it was real difficult to make it down to the 145 division, and I think that kind of hindered my performance. So, with this fight, we got lots of time to cut the weight, so it should be a great performance.
Yeah, I was just saying because you've fought between 45 and 55 throughout your career. In the long run, where do you see yourself? And with the short notice, sorry, with the longer notice, is it easier for
Yeah,
you to get to 45?
Yeah, definitely 145. Before I got in the UFC, it was difficult to find fights. So sometimes I would go up to 155 just for the sake of getting a fight. And then in the UFC, again, my first fight was at 155. It was on like 3 days' notice. And again, it was just to get in the UFC. Then I went down to 145. But again, just with the weight cuts and stuff, it wasn't really going great. So I went back up to 155 to try that out, and that felt great. Like the weight cut went great, so I was like, okay, well, I'll probably stay at 155 then. But then they offered me the Doho Choi fight at 145. So I asked if they could move it to 150 or 155, and they said no, it has to be 145. So I was like, all right, well, there's enough time. I'll give 45 another shot, and then that training camp was one of the best training camps yet. Again, because I had like 2 months, maybe a little bit over 2 months to cut down to 145.
Mhm. And I gotta ask because your last two fights, you go into London to face Jai Herbert, and then you're supposed to go to Korea to fight Duo Choi. That one ends up at the Apex. It must be nice for you to be in front of your home country for this fight.
Yeah, it'll definitely be nice to be the hometown guy. I think traveling, being the away guy, might play a factor sometimes in some of the judges' decisions. It's hard to say, but I definitely feel like the last two fights, I thought I got the better of both my opponents. So, hopefully here in Canada, I'm going to stop the fight. But if it does go to decision, hopefully there won't be any bias for my opponent.
Is it all frustrating that they were originally going to go to Ontario? It ends up in Vancouver. Ontario is where you're from.
Yeah, and like Vancouver is like almost the opposite side. Was literally pretty much as far west as you can get from Ontario. Um, but I mean, it's still going to be in Canada. A little bit of a time zone change and stuff, but it's still better than going to, London or South Korea or something like that.
Mhm. And looking at this fight, have you gone to watch the footage on Blake Bilder? What stands out to you, and what gives you the advantage over him?
Yeah, I've watched like his contender series fight, his fight in UFC. Yeah, he's got good boxing, a little more circular punch and stuff like that. He does throw kicks, but it doesn't look like he really has a ton of power or anything on the kicks. And then he shoots doubles. He was able to land one takedown in his UFC fight. Looked like he had pretty good top control. Looked like he was doing well there. But then after that takedown, he kind of failed on the rest of his takedowns. So I'm not super impressed with his takedown offense. I know I have great takedown defense. I think he's like a brown belt in jits. I'm a brown belt in jits. And I think my striking, coming from more of a Muay Thai kickboxing background, I think is definitely going to trump his kind of amateur boxing background.
Mhm. Fair enough. And after the loss to Billy Quarantillo, you took almost 2 years off, but this will be your third fight in nearly a year. How important is it for you to just like stay active and be able to get in sort of a rhythm?
Yeah, like every fight when I'm staying active like this, I feel like I get better. I didn't want to take the time off after the Billy Q fight, just with pandemic and different kind of stuff going on. Um, I wasn't able to get any fights. But yeah, now that I've got the ball rolling, I'm almost always in training camp. So yeah, I do feel like I don't have to worry about things like ring rust or anything like that. The last fight is still fresh in my mind of things that I did well and things that I could do better. So it's going to be a lot easier to move forward into this fight with the last fight being so fresh in my mind.
If all goes well and you beat Blake Bilder, how busy would you like to continue being in 2023? And what are sort of your long-term goals for the end of the year?
Yeah, yeah, definitely want to stay busy. Hopefully the UFC comes back to Canada this year, so I'd love to be on that card. But I mean, at least get one or two more fights in before the end of the year.
Fair enough. And then, so you're training out of House of Champions MMA. You're still there, right?
Yeah.
And are you still also at you was it Muskoka Kickboxing?
So Muskoka Martial Arts now.
Okay, got it. And so how has training, at those two gyms helped you? A little bit of a smaller gym, but I feel like a lot of the times I hear, the smaller gyms are more beneficial in that you get a lot more attention on directly on you. And it's not like you're just another guy in the gym.
Yeah, exactly. So I get to do again the majority of my trainings at House of Champions. Then I come up to Muskoka Martial Arts on the weekends, but I also travel over to Niagara Top Team sometimes during the week, and that's kind of where we'll get some of the sparring in and get all the extra bodies. Like training at a big gym.
Mhm.
Then I get to come back to House of Champions and have a lot of one-on-one attention with my coaches and come up here and again have a lot of training sessions where, I'm the focus as opposed to there being, three or four other UFC fighters and some Bellator fighters and a bunch of other guys in the room. I get to kind of steal some of that attention to make sure that I'm improving my game.
Who've been your main, go-to training partners for this one?
So we always got Mike Malott. He's also going to be fighting on the June 10th card.
Mhm.
Deanna Belbitsa fighting on the June 10th card. At Niagara Top Team, there's Jazz Divizius fighting on the card. Anthony Romero, I think he's fighting soon in PFL against Aubin Mercier. So he's one of my main training partners. Xavier Nash, he's fighting for I think the BFL title out in BC, I think the day before or something like that. It's like June 9th or something. So, yeah, it's like a lot of high level guys. Um, Aaron Jeffries, he's fighting in Bellator. So, a lot of guys fighting at a high level, and we're all pretty much getting ready for fights. So, we're all kind of in training camp and starting to ramp up, together.
Yeah, and just hearing all those names, there's another, sort of collection of Canadian fighters who are all kind of on the rise. How important is it for you to like be part of that wave and to kind of be part of the next wave of Canadian MMA?
Yeah, it's great, and it's great when we can kind of come together and train together. Some of us are fighting Bellator, PFL, or UFC. Some of us are in the same weight class. But yeah, I think being able to get kind of the best here in Ontario and come together and then train together and then sit down afterwards and kind of talk about what I did well or what they did well and what we can improve on and bouncing kind of ideas off other high level athletes like that is going to be what really grows the sport. If we just have, one UFC fighter at this gym, the one UFC fighter at that gym, and nobody's cross training and nobody's kind of building off each other, then I think the Canadian MMA growth really slows down. So I think with all of us kind of within 45 minutes of each other and being able to train together is really blowing up the Ontario MMA scene.
Love to hear that. And then for your, fight card, main event, Amanda Nunes, Arena Aldana, how do you see that fight playing out?
I'm leaning towards Amanda Nunes. It's hard to bet against her. I think her one loss against Julia Pena was a bit of a fluke, and then other than that, we've seen her be pretty dominant in every other fight other than that. So I think it'll be something similar to that.
And then your weight class, Alexander Volkanovski defends against Yair Rodriguez at the start of July. What are your thoughts on that fight?
I definitely think Volkanovski's going to win, but after seeing that last fight, year versus
Josh Emmett.
yeah, Josh Emmett. Um, that's I feel like that was a whole new level of year. I've trained with Josh a bit before at Alpha Male, and obviously I've seen his fights in the UFC, and he's kind of like a wrecking ball. You know, he's a little bit shorter, he's stocky, but he's super durable, moves forward with a ton of power. And the way Yair was able to move around and use his kicks and kind of completely shut him down, you know, it was pretty impressive. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think Yair's going to put up much more of a fight than I first thought, but I still don't know if he can really, you know, slow down Volkanovski or you know, hurt him at all in the fight. I think we'll probably see a decision for Volkanovski.
Fair enough. And then just my final question, UFC 289, Kyle Nelson, Blake Bilder. Kyle, give me your official prediction.
Yeah, I think I think Blake's going to be crazy enough to want to stand with me for a bit, and I think I'm going to touch him pretty early, and you know, that's going to scare him a little bit. And then we'll see him start to try and shoot. I'll defend a couple takedowns, and then you know, then I'll put him away with some strikes.
Well, Kyle, I'm wishing you the best of luck. Guys, Kyle the Monster Nelson returns to the UFC at UFC 289 on June 10th. Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time.
Awesome, thanks a lot.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.